Have you ever felt like, you're putting in all this effort day after day, but the results just don't seem to match up?
Mm. Yeah, I think most people have felt that.
Or maybe you feel like you're just drowning in information, struggling to figure out what actually matters. It's a really common frustration, isn't it?
Absolutely. Overwhelm is definitely a modern challenge.
Well, today we're diving deep into a surprisingly powerful framework, one that promises to kind of flip that script, maybe help you achieve more with less.
Mm.
We're talking about the 80-20 principle.
Also known as the Pareto principle.
Exactly, the Pareto principle. So our mission today is to unpack this whole idea, starting right from its, well, really intriguing origin.
Which aren't what most people expect.
Right. And explore its diverse applications. I mean, everything from huge corporations right down to your personal daily life. And ultimately help you listening understand how to find those vital few actions, the ones driving the majority of your impact.
Yeah. Now, you might have seen it pop up online, maybe in Reddit threads asking, does this 80-20 rule really work? Or for programming or whatever. We're going to try and go beyond just the surface level today.
And what's really remarkable, I think, is that this principle, it reveals a kind of systematic and predictable lack of balance in how things operate. It often feels quite counterintuitive,
How so?
Well, it's not about perfect symmetry like 50-50. It's about recognizing and then deliberately focusing on the minority of causes that ultimately leads to the majority of your results.
Okay, let's unpack that. Where did this idea even come from? Because like you hinted, it definitely wasn't born in a business school, was it?
No, absolutely not. The underlying pattern was first observed way back in 1897 by an Italian economist, Vilfredo Pareto.
Okay.
He was studying wealth distribution in Italy and noticed something pretty striking. Roughly 20% of the population owned about 80% of the land.
Wow, 80-20 right there.
Well, not explicitly named 80-20 by him, but he identified this consistent, unbalanced relationship. It wasn't just a one-off. And I heard, this sounds a bit strange, but there's a connection to peas in his garden.
That's right. It sounds quirky, but apparently, in his own garden, Pareto noticed a similar pattern, that a mere 20%, roughly, of his pea pods produced about 80% of the peas.
Huh. So it wasn't just economics?
Exactly. And it seemed to cement for him that this imbalance was a fundamental truth. Not just about money, but about natural systems, too. The irony, though, while Pareto seemed to realize how important this was, he was apparently very bad at explaining it to other people. So its significance kind of lay dormant for a generation. It was waiting for its moment, really.
So it wasn't an overnight sensation. It had to be rediscovered, kind of given new life, before it started shaping the modern world. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Indeed, it really took off after World War II, thanks mainly to two pioneers. First, there was George K. Ziff.
Ziff.
He was a Harvard philology professor studying languages. In 1949, he independently rediscovered this imbalance, but he called it the principle of least effort.
Least effort. I like the sound of that.
Right. He found that roughly 20 to 30% of any resource accounted for 70 to 80% of the related activity. He had this famous example.
Go on.
That 70% of marriages in Philadelphia back in 1931 occurred between people living within just 30% of the city's distance. People took the path of least resistance, geographically.
Yeah. Fascinating.
And get this. For anyone with a cluttered workspace, Ziff even provided a kind of scientific justification for the messy desk.
Really? How?
Now, he observed that frequency of use naturally draws the most used items closer. So the things you use 80% of the time end up in that easily accessible 20% of your desk space. It's about efficiency, even if it looks chaotic.
Okay, I'm telling my boss that next time. So a philology professor, who is the other key player?
That would be Joseph Moses Jurin, a Romanian-born U.S. engineer. He became known as the quality guru.
Ah, quality control. That makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In 1951, he really popularized the term Pareto principle and also the rule of the vital few. He made it synonymous with the search for high product quality. But it's quite a story because initially...
Let me guess, people didn't listen?
Pretty much. U.S. industrialists, they weren't that interested in his theories back then. They thought their systems were, just fine.
So America wasn't buying it. What happened?
Well, Japan invited him to lecture in 1953, and they embraced his ideas wholeheartedly. It was a really pivotal moment.
Oh, so?
Japan used his focus on finding the vital few causes of defects to completely transform their economy. They went from being known for, frankly, shoddy imitations, to becoming this powerhouse of high quality and productivity.
Wow.
And this massive shift, Japan's success, eventually forced the West, especially after 1970, to sit up and pay serious attention. They realized this principle was a key part of their competition's success.
It's incredible. A concept from peas and land ownership quietly becomes this engine of progress, revolutionizing whole industries. Let's look at how it played out in, say, two major transformations.
Absolutely. It was a core building block, first, of the quality revolution. We're talking roughly 1950 to 1990.
Okay.
It fundamentally changed how companies tackled defects. The key idea Juran pushed was that losses, like defects, waste, rework, they don't arise from a huge number of random causes.
No.
Usually a few key issues, the vital few, are responsible for most of the problems.
So find the 20% of causes creating 80% of the defects.
Precisely. For instance, Ford Electronics Manufacturing used it in a quality program. By focusing on the vital few bottlenecks, they cut their product cycle time by a staggering 95%.
95%, that's huge.
It really is, and we still see this today. Modern software, like ABC Data Analyzer, uses Pareto charts. It can show a company how, say, 80% of maybe 1,000 customer complaints can be eliminated just by correcting the top 20% of underlying causes.
Makes sense.
It even applies way upstream in product design. It's often found that a, frankly, surprising 80% of a product's total life cycle costs get locked in after only the first 20% of the development time.
Wow, so those early decisions have massive downstream consequences.
Exactly. Getting that early 20% right is critical.
Okay. That covers the quality revolution. What about the digital world, the information revolution?
Right, the information revolution, starting around the 1960s. Computing and software folks widely use the 80-20 principle. IBM, for example, back in '63, they figured out that about 80% of a computer's processing time was spent executing just 20% of its operating code.
Only 20%.
Yeah. So what do? They immediately rewrote their software to make that heavily used 20% super efficient and accessible. Made the machines way faster. And later, companies like Apple, Lotus, Microsoft, they applied this principle with even more focus, to make personal computers cheaper and easier to use. The emphasis was always on selectivity and simplicity.
Finding the simple 20% of features that provide 80% of the benefit.
You got it.
Yeah.
Why build complex systems when a simpler version delivers most of the value?
Okay, this brings us to something really significant, I think, an implication of this rule. The winner-take-all effect. What does this 80-20 thing mean for, the big picture of wealth and success? It almost sounds like it reinforces inequality.
That's a very sharp observation. And, well, it does help explain some of those dynamics. The 80-20 principle helps explain the, frankly, astronomical incomes of superstars.
Like who?
Think Steven Spielberg earning $165 million back in 1994. Or the trial lawyer Joseph Jamil making $90 million. Compare that to, merely competent professionals in the same fields, earning a tiny fraction of that.
So a huge skew at the top.
A huge skew. And it extends to wealth concentration overall, like figures showing maybe 5% of U.S. households owning about 75% of household equity, or in global trade.
Yeah.
The U.S. dollar invoices nearly 50% of world trade, even though America's actual share of world exports is only around 13%. The dollar punches way above its weight, 80-20 style.
But if this imbalance just keeps reasserting itself, does that mean efforts to, say, create more equitable distributions are kind of doomed? What makes it so persistent?
That's a really important question. The source material suggests the 80-20 principle will always reassert itself. Why? Well, think about compounding advantages, feedback loops. Success tends to breed more success.
The rich get richer, sort of?
In a way, yes. The winners gain resources, attention, opportunities, which further amplify their lead over the trivial many. So to overcome this natural tendency towards imbalance, it requires, and this is a direct quote, conscious, consistent, and massive efforts, sustained to overcome it.
So not just small tweaks.
No, it implies fundamental shifts in systems or policies are needed if balance is the goal. It highlights that imbalance seems to be the natural state, and achieving balance requires deliberate, ongoing intervention.
Right. So we see this imbalance everywhere, from Pareto's P's to global trade. But how do you actually use it? How do you find that critical 20% in your own business, your organization?